It's been about 20 years. In fact, it was in November 1996 that this dream actually came to pass. But let me start back with February of 1996. During the first week of February 1996, I lived in Bend, Oregon. I had a business. My wife and my daughter and my daughters of marriage, we all lived there. And during this week, I had what would prove to be a prophetic dream. It ended up happening. It was dark and it was cold, and my daughter, who at the time was 12, was in the car with me in this dream, and we were in a chase situation with a half a dozen cars filled with gangbangers behind us chasing us, and there was a presence of my stepdaughter was holding a baby, either holding a baby or she was pregnant with a baby. But the driver of the lead car, was this gangbanger who was the father of this child. And I did not know the reason why they were chasing us. I just know that it was an intense chase. To me, it was a short dream, a glimpse that seemed to go on for hours, but it could have been only moments. I don't know. It just seemed like it lasted, one of those kind of dreams. When I awakened, I went downstairs to the den to start a fire in the fireplace. It was early, about 6 o'clock in the morning. Um, the daughter in the dream was at the time 12, and when she came down, she heard me lighting the fire, and she came down, and I told her about the dream as I was building the fire. And then, as her mother came down a little later, I told her about the dream. At that time, my daughter did not know anyone with a car, much less a gang member. She was a fairly normal, somewhat rebellious tween. Soon after the dream, my daughter began getting into trouble. She was arrested for stealing, fighting, and leaving home without permission, and just a variety of different things. Uh, she was out after hours, curfew, and so forth. And within a year, she had been arrested like 40 times, and she was frequently kicked out of school. Each time something happened, I would go to the juvenile hall detention place and pick her up, and I try to talk some sense into her. Over the course of 9 months, her behavior grew worse and worse, and she was, um, oh golly, I guess when I met her, when I met her mother, she was about 9 years old, and during the first 3 years, she was a really good kid. She did pretty well in school, cared about her behavior and the way she dressed, her hair, and so forth. But over the next 9 months, after this dream, her behavior had gotten worse and worse. Um, by Friday, November 22nd, 1996, when I arrived home from work, my wife then asked me if I would take her sister to a nearby apartment where she wanted to have us pick up her daughter and take her to the emergency room. But when we arrived at the apartment complex, my daughter was standing outside with a friend of hers who just happened to go to our church. And her aunt told her to get in the car. Immediately, she got in the car, and then a guy came out of the apartment, jumped in his car. My daughter told me that the man getting in his car was a gang member and that he was going to kill me. And immediately, a half a dozen cars following us, chasing us, all gangbanger types. And they chased us for a long distance. I guess it was a better part of 3 miles to St. Charles Hospital. It was a snowy night, and I just blew through stop signs and traffic lights, trying to drive as quickly and as safely as I could. As I said, the distance was about 3 miles to the emergency room. And when we arrived at the St. Charles Hospital there in Bend, Oregon, at the emergency entrance were three police cars, and it was probably the police cars that caused the gang members to drive on past. It was curious that I had a dream very similar to this experience or this incident just 9 months earlier. And so, and then 9 months later, my daughter, who was 14 at the time, delivered a child. The child was conceived with this gang member who was the lead person in this incident on November 22nd in 1996. And so she had been pregnant at the time of the chase. So that in that sense, it absolutely came true. And it would turn out that this gang was part of the Mexican mafia. That the chief of Bend police had showed me the Bend Bulletin newspaper showing that the Mexican mafia had infiltrated Central Oregon. This is one of three prophetic dreams, or I should say several dreams that were prophetic that God gave me that ended up happening.